Lagos lawmakers, others attend Africa's Region 47th Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference held in Balaclava, Mauritius. Lagos Assembly constitutes six-man committee to look into the state governor's request to assess a 500 billion naira bond to be invested in capital projects in the state. Plus, as Lagos becomes the 11th oil-producing state in Nigeria, members of the State House of Assembly have expressed concerns for host communities. A warm welcome to you out there. This is Lagos Parliament, a program that brings the state's legislature closer to you. I'm a regular host, Abimbola Agbebi, and on this episode of the program, we've got interesting stories for you, especially now that the House has resumed plenary 5 weeks after it went on recess. We'll be right back after the short break. Welcome back. Now, on the 24th of August 2016, parliamentarians across the African region gathered at the 47th Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference held in Balaclava, Mauritius. The Deputy Majority Leader of the Lagos State House of Assembly, Honorable Jimi, led a delegation of the House to the Legislative Conference.
The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is for this. Basically, it's for the African region, not the international. So it was hosted by Mauritius. We realized that the Millennium Development Goals were not achieved in the sub-Saharan Africa. So some of the Millennium Development Goals was later transited to Sustainable Development Goals. So in starting with the Sustainable Development Goals, we are now sitting at the level of the Parliament in African under Commonwealth, how to address the fundamental problems of our people, i.e. the issue of poverty, the issue of hunger, the issue of improving our agriculture, the issue of our environment, vis-a-vis the breakage of ozone layer that causes direct sun rays from. These are so many, including health. These are it is 17 to 18 cardinal issues that was deliberated upon. It was subjected into various committees in which all honorable members and clerk at table attended in order to rub minds. Eventually, there is a compromise that we should further continue interchanging ideas vis-a-vis correspondence through internet and through other hard copy materials.
As Lagos strives to attain its mega-city status, massive infrastructure development, among others, the need to assess a bond of 500 billion becomes necessary. This was the request forwarded by the State Governor Akinwumi Ambode to the state legislature seeking its approval. But the need to critically examine and clarify the purpose of the fund has been raised by the lawmakers. To this end, a six-man committee has been set up by the House and saddled with the responsibility of carrying out this task.
Money agreed to us from Federation account, VAT, and derivation. It is then we'll be able to know, oh, I haven't said this, I haven't know this, I haven't know this. We have an insight into what is in the sinking fund that will be used for the future repayment of all this indebtedness. It is then we can say, okay, let's give our note to it. It is good because it's going to be about the most cheap. You look at the gestation period, and yes, Lagos State has the best ratings, even more than Nigeria, in terms of credit rating. But then we need to have an insight into this, and that's the reason why we said, yes, it is good. We know for infrastructure development, we need to know what are you even using the money for? What are the infrastructure we are talking about? How critical are they to the livability, to the welfare of Lagosians? And that was why we requested for a better insight, for more information that we guide our decision either to go for the whole 500 billion or to go for part of it or not to go for anything. But if you look at the vis-a-vis other sources of borrowing, you know that if you go through the bond market, it's about the cheapest, and because Lagos has the ratings, people will yield. A lot of investors want to invest because we have never reneged.
As Lagos becomes the 11th oil-producing state in Nigeria, lawmakers in the State House of Assembly have raised concerns, especially for the host communities. The Chairman House Committee on Energy and Mineral Resources, Jimi Mohammed, set the ball rolling on the floor of the House. As the House resumed plenary 5 weeks after it went on recess, one of the issues tabled before the lawmakers was oil exploration in Lagos.
Communities and the environment has been enormous and very worrisome. The local indigenous people have seen little or no improvements in their standard of living while suffering serious damage to their natural environment. So to this extent, we wouldn't want our great state, Lagos State, to be in a situation where we would have to be looking for post-remedial situations of how to deal with this.
The discovery and exploration of oil in Lagos State is cheering news received by many, but certain concerns have been raised on oil-bearing communities. The lawmakers are particularly worried about the livelihood of residents in the communities, an issue which brings to mind the Niger Delta experience.
Thank God the oil has been discovered. I want to support the position has been canvassed by my honorable colleague, because as been said, we don't want to see a repeat of what happened in the Niger Delta.
We are talking about what is the developmental plan of the investors. It's not just for Lagos State to say, or for us to just say, okay, we want 13% derivation. We start looking at the socio-economic and environmental implication of that activities.
In this country, we have what we call, they always pay lip service to EIA. That is environmental impact analysis of whatever project you want to do. But I want to tell you that in Badagry, we never saw any EIA that will have predicted, will have told us what are the consequences of what's going to happen there. But I'm happy that Lagos State government is a very responsive government, and I believe they will not allow us to experience what is going on in Niger Delta and Badagry.
We all know what is happening in Niger Delta. And I hope that all the companies that will be going into that area will try as much as possible to make sure that 60 or 70% of the people that they are going to employ, the workforce, are Lagosians, and especially the people from that area.
Lagos State government must not only be a reactionary government, we must be proactive. We must take as we know, we are all representatives of our people. Their welfare, their well-being is our top priority. Beyond the discovery, beyond the 13% derivation, we must find a ways and means by which they must not suffer unduly for this discovery of this oil. And that is why I'm supporting Honorable Jimi Mohammed in bringing these officials of government to come and tell us what are they thinking, how are they going to ameliorate, because oil spillage will come, there will be degradation of the environment. What will they do when all of this happens? We must be proactive, and we must not allow those things to happen before we start thinking. So I join my colleagues and people of Badagry in calling these officials of government to come and explain, so that when they explain, we now know what next to do.
There's no way we look at it. We are going to benefit largely from this discovery of oil in the Badagry area. And I quite agree with all of you that need for us to be proactive, to put in place necessary structure that will protect the interests of the host community. The host community should also be seen as a stakeholder in this project. And we should also realize the fact that the control over oil and gas
is in the hands of the federal government. Notwithstanding, we must continue to do what is necessary to protect our society. So what is happening in Niger Delta will not repeat itself in our state. Well, I think it goes beyond calling the commissioners or officials. We should have a kind of stakeholder where the host community, the investors, and the state officials will come together to sit and discuss how to go about it so that we won't have issues or problems that will go out of hand in nearest future.
The House resolved to call a stakeholders meeting where the exploration company, the communities and state officials would meet to discuss the issues raised. Meanwhile, the Chairman House Committee on Energy and Mineral Resources, Jimi Mohammed, speaks on his expectations from the stakeholders meeting called by the House to look into concerns raised about oil exploration in Lagos State.
Well, the idea of a stakeholders meeting is to get every person who's involved in the discovery of oil, starting from the exploration aspect to communities who are around and the relevant authorities. The idea is for them to come together to see how we can put together and address socio-economic issues that the oil production will be bringing to the state, and more so to address the environmental impact of exploration within the axis. So we can avoid what we have seen in other parts of the South states, with a particular example to the Ogoni spillage. So I believe we're trying to take precautionary measures so as to avoid any of these spillages which would affect the livelihoods of the neighboring communities.
Welcome to the personality interview segment of Lagos Parliament, also known as My Stewardship. On the program this week, you will be meeting the lawmaker representing Ikeja Constituency 1 in the Lagos State House of Assembly, who also happens to be the Chairman House Committee on Energy and Mineral Resources. I'm talking about Honorable Jimi Mohammed. Now let me ask you this. As a trained lawyer and ex-managing director of a private company, now tell me, how did you venture into politics? I mean, why the law became business?
Well, I believe almost inevitably, by virtue of my willingness to give back to the society, what society gave to me, I've been able to manage both transition, which is what I mean is coming into the lawmaking aspect of life. I believe it's about coming to serve and giving back to the people what was given to you, bridging the gap between the people who are less privileged and the government. So, of course, lawmaking is not necessarily in the stricter sense of going into the House of Assembly and going into the chambers and making law. It's a management of people. It's a management of the constituents who have actually helped you to get there, who have voted you in there. It is you bridging the gap. It is you connecting the government to the constituents who have voted you. So I believe having had experience in private companies, which you have people who you manage, it's just a bigger circle of managing a company and now having to manage people. But of course, the people who you're managing now are from different sectors, if I may use, and it's your ability to compromise and strike the balance between your experience in the private sector and what you know right now that makes you what you are.
Okay, so now let's talk about bills and motions. Since you became a lawmaker in the House of Assembly, how many bills have you sponsored? And talking about motions, how many motions have you moved?
Bills. I haven't sponsored any bill yet. We're working on it. You'd find out that the Lagos State House of Assembly, it's one of the most vibrant House of Assemblies. Coming into here, what you want to do actually is you want to have some sort of ingenuity. And you'd find out that most laws have already been covered one way or the other. So if I'm saying in my 1 year and a few months here, I have sponsored a bill, it would be very ingenious of me. But I pride myself, we say, I am still learning and I've seen issues, I've seen how the bills will be sponsored, how it should be taken. And it's not just for the cameras that you sponsor bills. There must be things that really affect the area of your specialization or area that the constituents are suffering for or you feel there's a lack of in the place.
All right, so let's quickly talk about the people whose interests he represents here in the Legislative Chamber. Now, since they voted you in as a lawmaker, as their representative in the Lagos State House of Assembly, I mean, what have you done for them in return?
Well, basically, it's not necessarily what has been done to the Ikeja community. What we've been able to do, and the best thing I believe that most of them need, has been access to the government, hearing their cries, hearing their issues, and tabling it to the executive, and to see how we could come to their aid. By virtue of committees, what you find out is that you're not necessarily limited to Ikeja constituency per se, because when you now talk about Committee on Energy and Mineral Resources, we talk about the PHA, we talk about the discos. Oh, I don't have meter. It's not only Ikeja people that don't have meter. It can happen to anyone in a little more shore, it can happen to anyone in here or there. But within the Ikeja community, I'll give you a typical example of what had happened within the Oshodi, the destruction of the Mustafejo area of the Oshodi terminal. We did our best to try to intervene, to make sure that we sought redress for people who had been evicted out of the place. Of course, when the issues were tabled to the state government, there were overriding interests, which we had to respect. The overriding interest, well, we had to accept there were overriding interests, but then the people who had been evicted, had they made plans for them to be relocated or whatnot? So these are the issues where we've been able to bridge the gap, take up issues of that nature. And of course, I have projects which I'm looking to embark upon with main target issues of unemployment.
All right, so let's talk about your colleagues, the other 39 members in the Lagos State House of Assembly. What's your relationship with them like?
I believe I have a fantastic relationship, sometimes very embarrassing, where they call me Honorable Minister. They joke around that a lot, and it makes me feel a lot more secured around them. There's a sense of acceptance with them, and we have fantastic ranking members who are very willing to teach you and take you up the stride and up to the next level. And most times, one attribute of mine is I've never been shy to ask how to do things. The last thing you want to do on the floor of assembly is to go into a process, try to make or move a motion, and then it's flawed because of irregularity. So I am always willing to ask, and they're always willing to assist once I do ask them for the ways to do it.
Why Honorable Minister? I mean, why do they?
Well, I believe I'm related to some man called Jimi Mohammed. He happens to be the Minister of Information and Culture and Tourism. So for that reason, I believe they always relate me to him one way or the other.
And how does that make you feel?
How does that make me feel? Well, really, sometimes, yes, honored. Sometimes, I feel not recognized at all because of his image, which I'm having to live as high, and I have to do as much, and the expectations of what he has done and contributed to the party as a whole and the country as a whole. It keeps me on my toes every time, saying that you need to surpass the achievements he has done.
Okay, now let me ask you, what's your take on the present leadership of the Lagos State House of Assembly led by the Right Honorable Mudashiru Obasa?
I think I am very humbled and privileged to be serving within his leadership. What I have come to understand is that the ability to run a vibrant State House of Assembly, it's not necessarily all intellectual, but your capacity to be able to handle and manage a group of 39 other people with divergent views. And when I mean divergent views, I mean different levels of exposure. Your ability to keep calm. And he has shown by virtue of his leadership that he's well seasoned, well experienced, and sometimes you wonder how he's able to cope with this. And recently, I mean, look at the bills he's sponsored into law. Even within the time and time frame he has to do all his duties as the Speaker of House of Assembly, he still has time to do research into issues that are bordering around people, like the last one, the safety call law, which was sponsored by him. So it shows you that he takes his extra time after the rigorous part of managing a State House of Assembly, the administrative aspects, the leadership, and still has time to be able to think to put bills into law. So I think I must commend him, and I must say kudos, very well done in this 8th Assembly.
Okay, should I ask you then that what has the lawmaking business done to you in the last 1 year and a few months? What has it added, Has it changed you as a person? Just tell us.
Has it changed me as a person? Yes. It's changed me as a person to the extent to which now I can actually have a proper feel of what constituents go through. I actually see and actually feel the need for them to be represented. From my corporate world where I was coming from, yes, I didn't necessarily have to deal with this. But now when you go in, you see the level of poverty, you see the level of unemployment, and you can actually appreciate the sincerity of purpose of what these people want to do. And you find out most of them do want to work. But just that opportunity to get there to the government, you need to listen to them and look for how you can impact their lives. So whatever they say to you, you take it to the House of Assembly, you speak, and as I said, most of these things cut across. I can't make a bill into law, I can't pass a bill into law that would specifically affect Ikeja. It doesn't affect Ikeja just alone. When the bill passed into law, it would affect Lagos as a whole. But of course, the pertinent issues would start from Ikeja, and maybe little things such as maybe roadworks, palliative measures that need to be done just to ease their places. Most times you move it as motion, and then hopefully the executive here and see reason as to why they need to do what they need to do, and they go and execute it there.
Wow. Well, finally on this segment, before I let you go, I've got 2 questions for you. The first one is, what should Lagos residents expect from the Lagos State House of Assembly in coming years? And the other part of the question is, what should your constituents expect from you in coming years?
Lagos residents, too, what they should expect from the Lagos House of Assembly as a whole is good representation. And I say with all sense of humility that this is one of the most vibrant State House of Assemblies where cogent issues are discussed, matters affecting constituents are taken as priority, and feedbacks are usually given back to the constituents, which they feel almost immediately. And this can't be done without the listening ear of His Excellency, Mr. Akinwumi Ambode. There's been a very healthy and symbiotic relationship between the legislative and the executive, and it takes a person of his caliber to be able to understand the needs and immediately swing into action to do the necessary things. Personally, what I would say with my own constituents in Ikeja, when I came out, I believe I was called the seed, and my slogan was facilitation of growth. I want to assure them that I've been elected to serve, and I'm here to facilitate growth. Whatever representations I need to do, I am here to serve.
Wow. I must say that it's been nice chatting with you on the program, sir. Thank you so much for coming on the program, sir.
Thank you very much.
And I've been chatting with the lawmaker representing Ikeja Constituency 1 in the Lagos State House of Assembly, who also happens to be the Chairman House Committee on Energy and Mineral Resources, talking about Honorable Bola Jimi Mohammed, thank you so much for coming once again.
Thank you very much.
Yes, the program is still Lagos Parliament. Please stay with us. Meanwhile, a visit to Ikeja Constituency 1 gave an insight into the contributions being made by the lawmaker representing the people in the legislative chamber.
Has actually been contributing to the development of this place. A few days ago, I remember him at Onigungu community where we had a sort of collective leadership meeting. I'm not talking about, I'm coming of community leaders, you know. He was also there, interacted with us and let us know exactly what is happening in the council and the House of Assembly. I personally, I am very satisfied. And the people with whom I interact with, they also tell me so much about him. And I think he's a very amiable person. He's a very good boy.
He promised in the time of campaign, say we do computer center for our children here. They have already bring the computer down to Oregon School now to take off from that place. And the second one, when I so like, is that I hear that he moved one motion at House about the petroleum when they get for Lagos State. Say they should carry all the people in that area along. So I so love the board. It's performing very well.
Bola Jimi Mohammed, since when I was in Lagos, I'm not saying representative, we represent my local government like him. Because before we send many people, but now we know that we have representative in Lagos State. He done so many things, unlimited. Because of some of our elders, you're going to help them. Some of our youth, you're going to help them to bring some job, to be godfather for us. So that's why now we are very, very, very appreciate what he's done for us.
The program is still Lagos Parliament, but just before we go, here are some legislative tips. Now, do you know that in Parliament, bills are usually introduced through two sources: private member bills and executive bills. Well, that's it on the program this week. Thanks for watching. I am Abimbola Agbebi. Join us again next week. Bye for now.